The doors to the Patients Getting Paid membership community are now wide open. This is a community of people with chronic illness learning to find and create flexible, remote work that accommodates their health. I call us chronicpreneurs. There are trainings, coaching calls, networking opportunities, co-workings, and a ton of resources. Want to take better care of yourself and still generate an income? Join us at patientsgettingpaid.com. Welcome to the FUMS Now podcast show, where you'll gain information, inspiration, and motivation for living your best life with multiple sclerosis. Find us online at FUMSnow.com. I'm your host, Kathy Reagan Young. Hello and welcome. Today's episode is the second half of the interview I did with Marty Shenkman, an attorney specializing in estate planning for people with chronic illness in general and MS in particular, having had to change his personal estate planning strategy when his wife was diagnosed with MS. If you haven't done so yet, please be sure to listen to the first half of this interview, episode number 101. Let's get back to the interview. I threw it out that you were coming on the show, and if there were any questions, and let me just tell you, Mr. Shenkman, it was an onslaught.
Call me Marty.
Okay, Marty. Marty, but
don't say Martin. The only one in my life that called me Martin was my mother. And
when you were in trouble.
I was always in trouble.
Yeah,
when I heard
too.
Martin,
right.
Bad.
I was Kathleen, and when I heard that was trouble. I put together, a few that were more representative of the throngs that responded. So we'll just start with Liz. She says, I'm not married, but in a long-term relationship. If I need to go to a facility such as an assisted living facility or a nursing home, how do I make sure my interest in our house is best protected? Or how to plan possibly for long-term placement. That was one that kept coming up. Long-term.
Let's break it out into segments.
Sure.
Read each part and let's talk about each part.
Sure.
That's kind of a compound question.
It is, yeah. So if she needs to get, she's in a long-term relationship. If she needs to go into a facility.
Time.
Okay. Oh, we're stopping there. I'm not married. I'm in a long-term relationship, period.
Yeah, so you got to be careful because a long-term relationship, we don't know what that means legally. Right? So depending on the state you're in, and by the way, everything depends on state law. So at most, I'm giving you general answers for educational purposes. That's a general caveat to this.
Right.
But you got to figure out what that means. You may need a living together agreement because if the relationship breaks up, if the call it partner, significant other dies, what happens? You need to figure out what you need to do legally for that.
Gotcha.
And question. And this is for the person who asked the question.
For Liz.
Liz, and I don't mean to be questioning or disrespectful of the relationship, but, is there a reason you're not married? Does that have an impact on the commitment that each of you have for the other? So if you, Liz, are living with MS and, your symptoms get much worse and you need more help, is this person committed? And I don't mean to upset you or ask tough questions, but you got to ask tough questions if you're doing planning.
Think about.
How much can you rely on that person, right? Another thing, let's say you end up in the hospital, Liz. A person whom you're living with, that may not be recognized by the hospital as a relationship that gets that person permission to visit you, leaving aside the complications of COVID, which may make nobody be able to visit you.
Right.
But you probably should have a healthcare proxy, which designates somebody as a healthcare agent. And assuming you want to name your partner, significant other as your agent, you should do it. And you may want to expressly provide that not only is this person my healthcare agent, but I expect them to be treated as if they had the same rights as a spouse in terms of visiting, because that may affect their rights to visit you. All right. So now that was the first phrase.
Wow. Holy smokes. Okay. If I need to go into a facility such as an assisted living facility or nursing home, how do I make sure my interest in our house is best protected?
Okay. Now that's a question I can't really answer. And I'm going to tell you why so you can try to find the right person. And this is something you're going to have to pay a specialist and they can get pricey. What you're asking is if you own an interest in a home, and you have to go into a nursing home. And I think what you're really asking is you may be on Medicaid. You have to find out what the laws are in your state. So there may be steps that you can take to safeguard that home, perhaps by transferring it to a trust, transferring it to somebody else, perhaps your partner, perhaps not. But be very, very careful. A lot of the Medicaid planning entails transferring an asset into an irrevocable trust. So that's going to cost you a few bucks for children. I don't know if you have children. That wasn't in the fact pattern. Many people do that because they feel they can implicitly trust their children. That worries me, folks, because I've seen many a child over the 40 years I've been doing this.
Right.
You're supposed to say you don't look that old, Marty.
You don't look that old, Marty.
Thank you. So I've seen, sad situations where children will do not such nice things for the money, and poor parent is not really taken care of as they should. Right. Now, again, and I don't mean to offend you in terms of your relationship, but you got to ask the tough questions. If you just transfer that asset to your partner, does that solve the issue? But I don't love that either. What if your partner gets sick? What if your partner, significant other, gets in a car accident or is disabled or dies? If that person dies, how do you know their will is leaving the money, the house, back to you? So you got a tough question there. You need elder law Medicaid advice. You need to use a lot of practical, hard thinking about your relationship with that person and others, and decide if you're going to put the house in that person's name. If contractually you get it back or you sign a separate agreement to get it back, does that disqualify it as a protective step for Medicaid planning?
Yeah. Wow.
If you're well enough to get long-term care insurance, is that worth doing? If you've been diagnosed with MS, my guess is that long-term care insurance, if it's available, and it may be, is going to be very pricey, and it's pretty pricey anyhow. And the whole industry has really changed over the years. So I don't know if that's a viable option. You got a lot of questions to look at.
Yes.
And once you find out legally what you're going to do, you also have to start addressing the financial planning. How long can you afford to live on your own?
Right.
Can you modify your home to make it safer so you can stay in your home longer? There's a lot of devices and technologies you can use. You can get a home automation system that literally from an iPad can control virtually everything in your home. You can use voice commands to control virtually everything in your home. Yeah. So, there's lots of things that may be options. So you need to explore those as well.
Yes. And in fact,
that's a long-winded and complicated answer, but it's not an easy decision, and we would need an awful lot of facts to know where to go with it.
There's a lot of if this then that in that one too. So obviously she needs to find an attorney in her state to help her.
No, it must be an elder law or Medicaid planning attorney, because those are the people, that's the specialty. I don't do that, even though I do estate planning.
Yeah.
I mean, I can talk to a degree about it because I kind of fringe on it, but that's not my specialty. You want a specialist, and it's got to be in the state where you live and your home is, because those laws will be different than probably every other state.
Right. Ugh, just to complicate things further. All right. I hope this one's...
But you want real answers. You don't want
100%.
Fuzzy answers.
No.
Answers.
Right. No, I didn't mean that to you. I'm saying to complicate things, there's not going to be a pat answer for everyone. It's state determined, right? And
it's very fact determined, right?
Yeah.
If you can trust this person 1,000% that you're living with, if you have to go into an assisted living facility because you can't modify your home, you start to chip away. Let me, and I know we're way over time, but let me give you sort of a model of how I approach complex issues like that. I call it the jigsaw approach, right? When I do jigsaw puzzles, which I don't like to do, my wife is like ridiculously good at it. I hate them. But when I do them, and I like the ones with like 14 pieces, I try to look for those big corner pieces, because I know once I get a corner piece or two in, or maybe one of those big chunky pieces in the middle, everything else kind of fills in.
Fill it in.
That's what you need to do when you have a complex planning situation like Liz has. Start with some basics. So what is the relationship with this individual? How much can you rely on them? Do you have an option to stay in the home that you're talking about if you can modify it and make it more accessible? And can you stay there much, much longer, right? How much resources do you have? So as you start to get answers, you can fill in pieces. What I might do if I were Liz, in Liz's position, I would probably want to go for a consult with a Medicaid or elder law specialist in my state, ask them all these questions, get that knowledge and information. And you can certainly search online for some of that, but it's pretty complicated. And if you get something that's a little bit outdated or from the wrong state, it could really throw you off. But I would get the consult with a Medicaid attorney because that's an expenditure I think you really kind of have to do. And then I would fill in some of the puzzle pieces, because once you get 2 or 3 answers to some of the things we talked about, the rest of the pieces may fill in fairly easily. But you got to lock down some of it.
Yeah. Love it. Okay. Well, thank you for that. I think this one's going to be a little easier. It's from Mary, and she
Not if I can help it. I'm a lawyer.
Mary says, I would like to ask how I can find an estate attorney who specializes in people with chronic illness near me. And I think you already referenced probably not somebody who specializes in chronic illness, right?
I think what you want is a good estate planning attorney. And I'll give you a couple comments and thoughts on that. I don't think there's anyone that specializes in chronic illness any more than there's somebody that specializes in fill in the blank.
Well, I can promise you there is not. I have been searching and searching literally for years. And that's why I was so happy to find you. I know you don't claim to be, a chronic illness attorney, but you've got this background and nobody else does. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I think first of all, Kathy, if you email me, I'll get you some materials that you can post.
Great.
So if you get a good estate planning attorney and you give them some of these materials, they should, in an hour or two of preparation time, be able to understand better what it is. I think if you do what Kathy suggested and you actually write a little memo to them, a letter, here are my current symptoms. Here's how it affects my life. Here's how it affects my family or my loved ones, however you define that. You got to let them know that too. Here's what, based on my discussions with my neurologist, I believe the disease course to be. They can then help you plan. Now, how do you find a good estate planner? You got to be careful, because the fact that somebody's a member of a particular organization or has particular credentials sometimes is good. Sometimes you can't tell, and it depends on the credentials. And I'm not going to list any because some mean more than others. But you got to be careful of that. How do you know they're good? You want someone, I think, that does most of their time doing estate planning. Frankly, you want a specialist that does nothing but estate planning. If you live in a big city, that's probably easy to find. If you live in a smaller, more rural area, there's a tendency for practitioners, attorneys, for example, but practitioners of all types, to be more generalist because they're dealing with, a less densely populated area.
Sure.
So, if that's the case, I think looking for someone that does nothing but estate planning may be impossible. But then you want to look for somebody that does at least 25% of their time estate planning. You want someone that is not, doing 3 wills a year and they're going to help you out.
Right.
Most of the time they're doing criminal work. You want someone that has some meaningful commitment to estate planning, even if you live in a rural area. Now, how do you know who's good and who's not? It's very hard to tell because a lot of people can be very convincing that may not be very good. But if you have friends that have used the person, if you have a banker where you use, you bank. And even if you don't have a banker, if you use one of the large banks and you call up the manager and say, my name is Kathy Regan. What do you
Reagan,
go by?
Kathy Reagan.
Reagan. My name is Kathy Reagan. And I'm a customer of the banks. I need a question. I got to find an estate planner. Can you recommend anybody? I've been a manager of your local bank, I'll tell you. And somebody that works in that kind of position probably knows pretty much everybody in that community that does that kind of work.
Yeah.
So, if you have a financial advisor, they're going to know who's good and who's not.
Right.
But just be a little careful. Sometimes they tend to send people to the people who send them work, not the people who are good. So ask them, are you telling me this because you really know this person's good or because they send you work? Listen, I don't think Kathy is shy. She would ask the question, and you should too. Right. It's very important.
Yeah.
So I think you want to find a good estate planner, not somebody that's a specialist in something specific. Now, distinction, which we talked about earlier in Liz's question, if you need Medicaid planning about nursing home and how to protect assets from nursing homes, so let's say that money will go to your kids, for example, you got to get a specialist in that area. That's a specialty.
Mm-hmm. A question that came to my mind as you were talking about this, Mary did ask, for someone near her, but is that necessary if she's really rural? Can't you do it via Zoom now? As long as they're in your state?
Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, doing as many meetings as you can by Zoom will keep the cost down. right? When you have a physical meeting with any professional lawyer, for example, you come in, you get coffee, you chit chat. When you get on a Zoom meeting, you kind of cut to the chase and start to business. So I prefer, web meetings. Not Zoom is not the only platform.
Right.
We're not advertising for them.
Right.
But I prefer web meetings, in many cases, because it's just so much more efficient, especially if somebody's cost conscious. And listen, if you have fatigue, why on earth do you want to spend an hour driving someplace and driving 100%. Back? And what if the fatigue kicks in? I know my wife at 2 p.m, give or take, on some days, not all days, it kicks in. Right. So, if she goes and has a great morning meeting with somebody, I don't want her driving if the fatigue kicks in. It doesn't kick in every day. It's that mysterious MS moment, right? You just don't know until you know.
That's right.
But I think you can talk to people, and you should call up the attorney before. And, I don't think you're entitled to like some do free consults. I kind of wonder about that, because my fear is if somebody's giving me a free consult, they're making it up somewhere, right? I won't do a free consult because it's a waste of time for you and me, and I have too much work to do. So the fact that somebody won't give you a free consult is not a reason to say no. But, if you can get an efficient hour of help out of somebody, maybe you can learn an awful lot and then make the right decision. But somebody surely could talk to you for 10, 15 minutes, and you can say, listen, I need planning done. I need a power of attorney. I know I need a will and some other documents. I have MS. Are you familiar with planning for people with chronic illness? Have you dealt with it before? And if they tell you, and it sounds like a bunch of malarkey, that's a technical term, maybe you don't want to go there. If they tell you, you certainly have done with a lot of different issues. I haven't dealt with that, but I can. You could say, well, if I can give you, if I hire you and we start, if I give you after we start a memo based on Kathy's good recommendation, outlining, my situation in a page, will that help guide you as to what recommendations and what documents I need? Listen to how they answer the question. So I think you can have an intelligent, general conversation for 10 or 15 minutes with somebody, which everybody I think would do, even if they don't do free consults, because you got to make sure they can help you.
Yeah.
I think one of the things you need, and this is maybe something to determine when you speak to the attorney for the first time, do they ask you about Medicaid planning issues? And if they don't, maybe you should. You should say, are you expert in dealing with Medicaid issues? And if they say no, then that's fine. But did they need to bring that up? Does that affect my planning? Do I need somebody that does that?
Right.
Now, I'll tell you, when people call me that have MS or other chronic diseases, if they need Medicaid planning, I may refer them out to an attorney that does Medicaid planning, because there's some very good people that specialize in that. If somebody is worth $1 million or less, or $2 million or less, they really need to look at Medicaid. And at that level of wealth, you don't want to necessarily pay for two attorneys. If somebody's worth, Kathy with her $10 million lottery winning, I would say, well, listen, you need planning for a higher level of wealth. That's what I do. I'm happy to help you. But, we need to address the Medicaid planning to see if it's relevant. I don't know if it is or isn't. We'll hire as co-counsel somebody that does Medicaid planning. We'll find out what it means to you. So,
Nice.
Where you are on the wealth spectrum will also affect it. So hopefully I've given you some ideas of how to go about getting a good attorney and making sure they're right for you.
Love it.
You are listening to this show on the Off-Script Health Radio Network. Yes, I said radio. My name is Matthew Zachary, co-founder and CEO here at Off-Script Health, and I wanted to thank you, the listener, for supporting our hosts, their guests, and our entire network of acclaimed shows, limited series, and major documentaries. In doing so, you are helping to fulfill our mission to make healthcare suck less for all of us together. To learn more about Off-Script Health and our network of other shows, series, and documentaries, visit offscripthealth.com. That's offscript, no T.com.
Just two more left. This one, I was going to say this one should be fairly quick, but that's what I said the last time. So this is from Rosie. And
I'm a lawyer, Kathy. I charge by the word. I can't give quick answers.
All right, from Rosie.
By the way, joking aside, lots of people love that silver bullet quick answer. And there's something about the American culture, and maybe that's what makes us as a country so successful. Everybody wants that. Bam, give me that quick answer. But folks, the quick answers, sometimes they work. And when I have a quick answer, I'll give it to you. If it's bam, bam, I'll tell you. But the reality is a lot of the questions, and these are very good questions from these two listeners, they're not simple. They're compound questions. And there's ripple effects to all the questions.
True.
And if you don't get a really broad enough answer, you're not going to help yourself. So don't ever, there's nothing wrong with getting a quick answer if it really works. But what you want is the answers to work, not to necessarily be quick.
Right. Yeah. You need the whole truth and nothing but the truth. From Rosie, she says, I had a question about setting up a will. I'm just in my early 30s, no kids, recently diagnosed with MS. I'm sorry, Rosie. Is it good to set up a will if I own nothing? And then she said, classic millennial, and have nobody to leave anything to?
So Rosie, let's start. When you get on an airplane and the flight attendant tells you what to do when the oxygen masks come down, what do they tell you to do? Kathy, do you know?
I do. Put it on yourself first.
Bingo. So Rosie, let's start with Rosie. Forget you dying and leaving money, okay? And even if you have assets, a lot of people with a lot of money, not no money, but even a lot of money, may not even need a will really. I mean, you still do one, but it may have little impact. What do I mean? If you have a bank account and you set it up POD, pay on death to, and name your sister, for example. If you have a house and it's joint with somebody who bought it with you, it goes to them when you die. If you have insurance or an IRA, and you better start an IRA, and you should have insurance, those have beneficiary designations. So those type of either the structure of the asset, the legal structure, the account title, or a beneficiary designation may control where all of your assets go. Over the decades of doing this, I've seen a lot of people come in very concerned about a will. And after I do a balance sheet, because we talked even on this program, Kathy, about getting things organized first, I start with a balance sheet and a family tree, family, however the client defines it.
Right.
Then we talk, because without those sort of corner pieces, the jigsaw puzzles, I don't know what to tell somebody. A lot of people have come in wanting a will, and I say, you should have one, because what if you miss something? But hey, by the way, you ain't got kids, you don't need to appoint a guardian, and all your assets are going to pass without the will, outside of probate, as it's called. So the will may not mean anything. So just a little background on the will. But now let's go back to the airplane analogy.
Yeah.
If you have MS and you're 30 years old, you got to start doing some financial planning, right? You got to see how long you can work. Maybe you'll be fortunate you can work for a decade, or maybe more than a decade. You got to start saving. You got to make sure that you're trained and have the knowledge, the education, the background to be able to find a career path that maybe you can work longer than otherwise may be the case, right? So if you're working in a job that's physically demanding, you may only be able to do that for another 5 years. Start getting educated so you have a career path beyond that, and maybe can work another 10 or 15 years. You got to get on a strict budget, right? It's worse than a strict diet, because you want to make sure you start saving so that you have resources whenever it is you stop working to supplement. You may still qualify for long-term care or disability insurance. Does it make sense or not? It really depends on the circumstances. That's beyond what we can get into. So you got to address your finances. That's more important than a will now. Second, does everyone need a will? Yeah, because who's going to be in charge of taking care of your estate? Where do your assets go if they don't pass in the way we said? But that if you have little money, no kids, and no one to leave it to, that's certainly not the priority. I think work skill training and planning your career is critical. You need a safety net. So if God forbid you can't take care of things, you got to have a durable power of attorney, because whatever money you do have, that's what you got. And by the way, that's important. And thank you for asking that question. I don't care how little money you have. Whatever you have is what you have, and you got to protect yourself.
Yes.
So you need a power of attorney, because you're now an adult, you're 30. You can't have a parent, if you have a parent, legally sign anything for you. So, and if you're single, you don't have a spouse that may have a joint account. So you got to have a power of attorney so someone can sign things and take care of legal, tax, and financial matters if you can't do it. And you want that power of attorney to be what's called durable, so it stays in force even if you become incapacitated. You need a healthcare proxy, and that's probably a reasonably simple document you can get online if you don't have a lot of money to spare, because you need to name someone to make healthcare decisions if you can't. You need a HIPAA, Health Insurance Accountability and Portability Act. Forget the fancy long name. I'm sorry, I didn't make it up. But a HIPAA release authorizes someone to talk to your physicians and see your medical records. You need that done because if something comes up, if you're religious, let's say you're a devout, fill in the blank, do you want religious considerations addressed in your healthcare decision making? You may be too young to remember the Terry Schiavo case, but it was a terrible, terrible tragedy. Young woman in her 20s I forgot what the medical event was, and there was a terrible battle between her husband and her parents over whether, Christian religious principles should apply. Nobody should put themselves or their family through that. Sign a living will saying if you want religious or other personal preferences in your care. And I don't mean to be depressing and talk about dying and all these things. You only got MS. You could live for another 60 years perhaps. But,
right. But we all have that same shitty prognosis. Let's be honest. Every one of us with or without MS.
Life is terminal, folks.
It is.
Right. Yeah. So we got to deal with it. But I think that you're asking, the fact that you're asking the question is great because you're thinking about it. Yeah. But I think the oxygen on the airplane is first. Take care of yourself. And that I would worry about finances, career choices, budgeting. Get basic, simple documents in place because you don't have a lot of money. But boy, if you got just a legally adequate power of attorney and a legally adequate healthcare proxy, you could save a lot of grief and aggravation and make sure that if you have a relapse or there's a period of time where you just can't take care of things, somebody can do it. And you got to talk to those somebodies and make sure they're willing to step up to the plate because signing a document, if somebody's going to think out on you, do people understand that word? Or is that dating me too much?
Why don't you explain that?
You want to make sure somebody's going to step up to the plate and not say, I can't do it.
Right.
Because once the stuff hits the fan, I won't use Kathy's words, but they're more colorful than mine.
Potty mouth.
You got to make sure you have documents in place.
Yeah.
So I've just given you a long list. I think it's overwhelming what I just said, but it is a lot of what you need to do. If I were you, I would start with evaluating your career and your career path and making sure you have a way to earn a livelihood for as long as possible. And, that may mean getting, some part-time training, evening program or whatever, so that you have a career path. I will then tackle a budget after you do that, and if you set goals of doing one of these things every other month, by the end of this year, you're going to,
you're way ahead of where you are right now.
Way ahead.
For sure.
And Kathy said something that's so important. It's not just getting this stuff done, but boy, if you look back in December and say, I listened to Kathy and Marty and I did all this stuff, and wow, I have so much less stress. I still got stuff to deal with. Mm-hmm. Kathy would use a different word.
Yes, I would.
You still have stuff to deal with, but you've done everything you humanly can do to deal with it. And you're going to be in a much better, safer place.
Yeah, 100%.
One of the things that I see people do, and I have another colorful term, not as colorful as Kathy, I call it the turtle effect, right? Mm-hmm. So when you get a diagnosis of MS, it sucks. I was there. My wife, who's a brilliant woman, very talented physician, one of the smarter people I've ever met, except for one fatal error she made marrying me, but that's a different story, not for the podcast. But my wife spent a month on a couch crying. I mean, she was just, because she is a doctor, understood exactly what the prognosis meant. Mm-hmm. But, we've been squeezing lemonade out of that lemon for a long time now, and we're going to keep doing that because that's what you got to do, right?
That's right.
And one of the things I told her very early on, because it became very apparent to me, I told her, you're fighting it. Don't fight it. Embrace it. Mm-hmm. So you got to embrace this diagnosis and not do what I see people do when they have any kind of bad news. I call it the turtle. You know what the turtle does, Kathy?
Yes, they pull their head in and they ignore.
And their arms and their legs are
everything's
all inside
in
the shell.
Yeah.
And they ignore everything.
Don't pay attention.
The turtle doesn't do much, folks.
No.
It ain't going to get you anywhere.
It just sits there. Yeah, that's not good.
It ain't going to solve a problem.
Right.
So what you got to do is, it sucks, squeeze lemonade out of it. And, we could even talk on a personal level on another show, how we've been squeezing lemonade out of it. But I think what you want to do is start tackling these things so you secure your future.
Yeah.
And every step you take, I'm going to say it in a different word, but Kathy said, it's empowering. It doesn't just only release stress, it's empowering. 100%. If you do every month, one of the things that we've just talked about, and you look back in December, you're going to feel so much more in control of everything.
Yeah. I told Marty early on, and I think this is what he's referring to. I said, I think you have to kind of be a little bit of a badass to have MS. Like, we're chosen because we're badasses. And I think that's what he's referring to. You feel like a badass when you tackle some of these things, particularly these things that seem overwhelming and scary. To his point, take it one at a time. It's not so overwhelming. It's not so scary. And you will feel like a badass at the end because you're checking all this stuff off and you're taking care of business, which is really important. And to that point, I just want to say the will thing, I think this is really telling that her questions was seemingly very, I don't own anything. Do I really need a will? And I think that goes to your point, Marty. There's so much more to a will. I think a lot of people assume a will is just to give their stuff away.
Let me correct you. So let me just correct you.
Yeah.
A will, you need to name a guardian if you have minor children. You need to distribute assets if you die. But as I explained in some detail, it may not affect most or even any of your assets.
Yeah.
But really, the phrase you want to use, Kathy, is you need an estate and financial plan because they really go hand in hand.
Right.
And tell me, her name was Roxy? I forgot.
Rosie.
Yeah, It's my age is showing. But Rosie, it was brilliant and astute and on point to ask, but I would change your question because I gave you the answer of not do you need a will, but do you need a plan? And the answer is affirmatively 100% yes.
Yep.
A will is worth having, but it's way low on your list. And I don't even know if I'd put it on the list for 2022. What I'd put on the list is all the stuff that we just talked about.
Yeah.
And Kathy, if you want to do some more shows and break down some of those pieces for viewers, we can do it. But you need, Rosie, to take affirmative action. It will empower you. It will reduce stress. And I promise you, if instead of doing the turtle, you remember the oxygen example.
Yep.
And you start taking proactive steps. When you look back in December and you celebrate 2023, you take out a bottle of champagne and toast yourself for what you've accomplished.
Cheers. Love it. And to your point, one of the most impactful things I felt like you said in that explanation to her was the career path. And she's so young at 30. She's got hopefully a whole lot ahead of her on her career. But you do have to plan for the future. And so, Rosie, one resource I want to suggest to you based on Marty's answer was patientsgettingpaid.com, because that's where we work with people with chronic illness to teach them how to find and create flexible and remote work that can accommodate their health and generate an income. So
one of the good things that's come out of COVID for all of us is 2 years ago, you really struggled to work remotely.
Yep.
And a lot of people didn't want to do it. In my business as a lawyer, I've worked remotely for more than a decade, for 12 years, because we spend 2 months a year on the road for sort of a charitable effort on behalf of chronic illness that we have. The impediment to me doing more remote work was that people weren't comfortable. COVID's changed all that.
Yep.
So there's far more opportunities, and you can create your own career or work. And if you can work remotely, especially from home, you save all the drain and strain of commuting.
Yep.
Especially in the heat of summer, because heat and MS get along about as well as stress and MS do.
That's right.
So if you can avoid commuting, certainly if not now, in the future.
Yeah.
If you can find a job where, you can work on your own time. So if you get fatigued at 2 p.m, you can take a nap. And if you're lucky, like my wife, and after the nap, you feel, a bit rejuvenated, you get back to it. You can design a lifestyle that, like I said earlier, instead of fighting the MS, you embrace it.
Yeah.
And you can keep yourself gainfully employed and secure your financial future for decades.
That's exactly right. I need to cut that part out and put that in a promo for Patients Getting Paid, because that's exactly what we're helping people to do. And it's really important. Right. It's really important. Look forward to that. The last question, but this is a big one. And this was putting it together from a lot of people have this question. It's, if I find I am unable to live alone, I need additional help, and I don't have long-term care insurance. Assisted living or skilled nursing facility is terribly expensive. Assuming we have to run through all of my assets first, then what? What happens when you're out of money, but you need help, and you don't want them going after your kids' money? Is that even possible?
Yeah, I'm not the right guy for that because that is a classic Medicaid planning issue.
Okay.
Do yourself a favor, find a specialist that does Medicaid planning in your state. And where I spoke earlier about, like, if you're in a more rural area and you want to get an estate planner, you're not going to find somebody, you may not find somebody that does 100% estate planning, maybe just someone that does a fair amount of it. Mm-hmm. You want someone that really specializes in Medicaid planning. It's a tough, complex specialty because you have to know the state laws, the Medicaid rules, nursing home rules, some of the insurance and other options that are available. I don't address that. And you want to get a specialist. What I would do if I were the person asking this question is I would get a consult with a Medicaid specialist in my state, pay for it because you need the advice, and learn what those options are. And if you have a Medicaid elder law specialist attorney, and I apologize that it's called elder law, that's just like elder financial abuse. It's the wrong name.
Right.
Because somebody with a chronic disease does not have to be older, like the prior questioner who was in her 30s. You got to get that type of attorney and get the answers as to legally what's permissible and what can be done, because you need to know that now. Yep. Once you have that information, then you need to do some serious financial planning and see what to do with the resources you have and what the options are that are available. And it's tough because government facilities may not give you the kind of care or environment you want. Depending on the progression and severity of your MS, you may have no choice. If there's options to stay at home longer, you may prefer to do that. But now that requires not just the understanding the Medicaid implications, but it also requires the financial planning, and it requires evaluating what you can do to make your home accessible and working for you. And it requires understanding who you can rely on. Now, there's some programs, and again, it's just not my area, so I'm not the right person, where even family members or friends can get paid to provide care for you. So those are things to look into. Yep. I would start doing the research now. Don't wait till you're running out of money. Find out what you can do now.
Love it. Perfect answer.
And I'm sorry I can't give you more. It's just not my specialty.
No, that's exactly right. I have kept you way over, and I'm sorry that I did not respect your time, but I'm just enthralled with what you're saying, and it's so helpful. I know it's going to help my community so much. I can't thank you enough for your time and help.
No, it's my pleasure. And I hope that we've given people some really practical, actionable advice, because that's what I think it's about. Let me give a quick 30-second summary, okay?
Please. Yeah.
So for everybody, it's holistic, it's collaborative. It ain't about a document. If you think estate planning for MS means getting a specific document, will, power of attorney, no, it means the whole shooting match, because if you don't take a holistic, broad approach, it's not going to work. Second, get stuff organized. You need information. You need it as simple and organized as you can. And we should talk about that on another show, because there's a lot of practical advice that I can give you, really practical stuff that we've done ourselves. Get it organized, have the least number of accounts and the least number of places that legally and tax and whatever else wise work for you. Get all that committed to writing. And when I say writing, it could be electrons on your computer, but you got to get it organized. You have to have it documented. So if something happens to you, you have a relapse, and an agent under a power of attorney has to step in, it's easy for them, and you've given them a roadmap. Keep in mind the oxygen example. You got to take care of yourself first. Keep in mind the turtle example. It works for turtles, but it's the worst thing you can do, because if you turtle for a year or two, especially after being, recently diagnosed, you could lose huge options, huge opportunities. Don't turtle. Just embrace it, however hard it is, and go forward. The gold standard for doing this kind of planning is a collaborative team of experts, an accountant, an attorney, a Medicaid attorney, in addition to the estate planning attorney, financial advisor, maybe a trust officer if you're wealthy enough, insurance consultant, and maybe even others as well. For many people, you can't afford all of that. So on the opposite end of the spectrum, we said, get educated, do what you have to do, even if it's an online document, but get educated before you do it. Keep it simple, especially if you have to do things on your own. You don't want to get really fancy and elaborate. And you may not even want to do that if you hire the gold standard team, but you surely have to keep it simpler when you do it on your own. The simpler it is, the less trouble you can get into, less mistakes you can make. get a group of people, of friends that maybe are also living with MS or that have similar financial situations, that have some common bond with you like that, and do it together so they can give you the objectivity you can't, and you can bounce ideas off each other. And I think the most important actionable step, make a commitment, whether it's one item a month or every other month, and just start. It's like that old saying, 1,000-mile journey begins with one step. You got to get started. And if you take digestible steps every month or two, and you look back, because now it's still January, right? You can still make your New Year's resolution. Yeah. If you take a digestible step every month or two, I promise when you get to the end of the year in December and you're looking back and recapping the year, you will feel less stressed, more empowered, because you've accomplished a lot.
Yep. 100%.
That's my summary.
Love it. I love it. Thank you so much for all of that. If people want to learn more about you and the Chronic Illness Planning Organization, which we didn't even...
The website's not activated.
I saw that, but coming soon.
Yeah, and
right?
I have nothing to sell. I'm just here to help. So there's nothing to learn.
Okay.
But I'll send you, if you email me, I'll send you some more stuff that you can post.
I will do it.
If we create a series of these podcasts, then I think you'll have a great resource to help people.
Fantastic. I appreciate it. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Really
Take care,
appreciate
Kathy.
it. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Quick shout out to Steve Woodward at podcastingeditor.com for the fantastic work on his podcast, including editing, show notes, and ingenious ideas. If you'd like help with your podcast, whether you're just starting out or an old pro, visit podcastingeditor.com and tell Steve I sent you. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate you listening to the FUMS podcast show. Be sure to subscribe to it so you won't miss an episode. You can do that right on the website at FUMSnow.com. While you're there, sign up for the free email list so you'll be among the first to know of any new findings in MS research, new therapies and products, as well as any blog posts and podcast episodes I release. Want to chat with others in the FUMS community? Join us on Facebook at FUMS Now. Thanks again, and don't forget to talk to the stupid disease as it deserves. Tell it FUMS every day.